Welcome to Bigfoot
and the Bunny.
This is a couple's journey into the mysterious,
the unknown, and the paranormal.
I'm your host, Chris Carr.
And I'm your host, Kirstin Johnson.
Together we are Bigfoot and the Bunny. Hey there, this is Chris from Bigfoot and the Bunny, and thank you again for joining us on the Paranormal UK Radio Network for another episode of Bigfoot and the Bunny. This week we talked to Natalie Zett. She is the author of Flower in the River, A Family Tale Finally Told. She is a writer, actor, photographer, and musician, and has worked as a freelance journalist for magazines and papers since her late teens. She's a proud graduate of Ursuline College, Pepper Pike, Ohio, where she majored in business administration. She also graduated from the Luther Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota, where she received a master's in systematic theology. And during the last few years, she became the family historian, which is where our ghost story begins. Natalie is drawn to misplaced and forgotten stories because they're more compelling than the world would let us believe. And while all that is true, I just want to let you guys know, when we got together, before we went live with the podcast, we have these sort of cat balls. I'm sure, the paranormal folk are familiar with these. They're cat toys. They're basically a motion detector ball with, some LED lights that, get triggered when they get moved. And we have them set up on the bookshelves behind us when we go live. And they've been quiet for quite a while. You may have heard us talk about them in the past. But interestingly enough, when we started talking to Natalie, like before we went live with the show, they were going crazy. And we did our little introduction, and they were still going crazy. And as soon as Natalie came on and started talking, they quieted down. So very interesting, a little mysterious. It's just data, folks, but we thought it was pretty cool. Anyways, without further ado, here's our interview with Natalie Zett. Welcome, Natalie.
Well, hello. How
are you?
I'm doing well. I'm waiting for the balls to go off now that you showed me what could happen. So I'm doing very well.
Good.
Excellent. We love your story. We know that you dug into genealogy and strange things happened. I think this is so cool because a lot of people, we do the DNA test now, 23andMe.
We did MyHeritage
and all that, which is unique in its own way. But to really get the story of what was going on, you have to dig deeper, right?
Mm-hmm. You do. And I think I came into it, this document that created this book ultimately was given to me the year after my father died. So my dad died in 1996. And I had a relative, my mother's older half-sister, who was a former reporter in Chicago. And she was getting up there, and she said, she gave it to me because she knew I was a writer. And she said, somebody please do something with this. I think it needs to be you. And I didn't know what this was. And so there was no DNA test or anything like that. It was just this 38-page document. And I think I want to say this to both of you and to whoever is listening. I think because my dad had just died, I was much more open to looking at that document because I was desperate. When you lose that one pillar, that one thing that was holding you up, It was like, what do I hold on to? So I just grabbed this document. And I knew nothing about my mother's family. For a lot of reasons, that history got lost. And I originally, this factors into the story too. I was originally from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, grew up in Cleveland, got out of Cleveland as soon as I could, and decided to move to the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul for graduate school because I knew no one here and I was related to no one. I had some issues about getting away from the family and starting fresh. And so my dad's dead and I'm living up here. Looking at this document, First of all, I saw this thing called the Eastland Disaster in Chicago in 1915. I'd never heard of it. And I saw that my grandmother, my mother's mother, had a younger sister who was 19 years old and killed on this thing when it capsized in the Chicago River. If you know downtown Chicago, this is a very narrow stretch of the river. It's right downtown. right near, and it looks like nothing could happen there. And the thing capsized and it killed 844 people. 2,500 were aboard. Yeah. And it was chartered for the Western Electric's annual company picnic. If you know, again, Chicago at all, there's Lake Michigan. You go across Lake Michigan. And on the other side of where they were supposed to be was the picnic grounds in the Indiana Dunes. And so it was supposed to be a leisurely day for the working class back in 1915. It was a tough road. And so they were giving these people a photo op for them, but also it was a big day for them. And my aunt, who was on the thing, shouldn't have been there because my grandmother was pregnant and gave her the tickets. So I have a chapter in my book called One Way Ticket.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, it was just a lot of weird things. So it's like, first of all, guilt. I thought, oh my God, grandma, wasn't there. She maybe should have been there and we wouldn't have been here.
You wouldn't
and
have
then,
been exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if I would be here. And so there was that. And I never heard of this thing. And it's so hard to get back to that emotional state that I was in. I was already kind of in a shock state. And then I saw this and I thought, what? And I thought, I've never heard of this thing. So I thought my mother's sister, who wrote the family history document, maybe got it wrong. She assured me, no, this was correct. And so I thought, why haven't I heard of this? And back in 1997, 98, when I really got obsessed with it, there was nothing. The internet was still not what it was. And eventually a site came about, but there was nothing. So I thought, oh man, so not only is this forgotten, not only is one of my relatives aboard this thing, there's nothing there. There's no evidence that the thing actually happened at first.
Can I ask you something though?
Please do, yes.
How did the boat capsize? I'm curious.
Well, sure. The boat was built in 1903 by I think the Jenks Corporation. Look it up on Wikipedia. I'm trying to do this from memory. And they built these boats for speeding across Lake Erie, speeding across the Great Lakes. That was, I suppose, like racing now. That was considered, the thing, and you wanted to have the fastest boat. And so the Eastland was already built kind of like a pyramid, like a little tiny base, and the top was very streamlined. And I guess from the time that she was built, she was listing, meaning going back and forth. And so she was kind of, I think they thought it was fun at first that it was going this way and that way. And then from 1903 until 1915, she had some problems. So she was beginning to rot. So they took concrete, and they started to fill in the holes on the ship.
Oh my goodness.
And then, it gets better. It gets better. This is my family. We end up in the worst places at the worst times. 1912, of course, I know. 1912, the Titanic, you remember that one. That capsized or hit the iceberg. And then they had the Fulman's Seaman Act, which required ships to have lifeboats for every passenger. So on top of the Eastland, they put all these lifeboats, the concrete. She's already top heavy. And I think that when everybody boarded, and there were about 2,500 on board, it took just a few minutes and she capsized. She went sideways into the Chicago River. People were crushed. They drowned. A lot of them ended up in the Chicago River. And there was a photographer there who was supposed to do the photo ops. And so he ended up being the main witness to the event. So there are tons of unfortunately beautiful, grisly photos of this event. So they're there. I think the Chicago Public Library has them. So that's how it happened. It shouldn't have ever been. I think it passed federal inspection through the greasing of some palms, but it was one of those things that was, like so many things, entirely preventable.
Yeah, totally questionable in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly, we did Google the pictures of it, and I wasn't familiar with the Eastman incident. But I didn't dig deep enough to see why it capsized. I mean, there are a ton of pictures out there on the internet.
There's a lot, yes.
Of it capsized and then
now there are, yes.
Up and it's so amazing.
That's where we got the background picture from.
I love that background picture, seeing it upright, not with laying in the
right,
laying on its side. Yeah,
it should have stayed, unfortunately.
Yes.
But you dug and tell us more.
Sure. Well, the Eastland didn't die when actually they finally got it upright. Whatever they do to redo a ship, they basically used it as a training vessel for I think it was the Illinois National Guard. Could be wrong about, but it didn't get totally scrapped until about 1943. So that thing was still around. Yeah. So God knows. So that's what happened in terms of my family. But again, since I didn't know about this, it was a shock. And I, as a writer, and I was already a published writer, I thought, Lord God, I've got to write about this because nobody knows about this. And I felt bad because my great aunt perished. And I thought, oh, Lord, I owe it to her. So I was talking to my mother's sister and I said, could you send me, she sent me some photos. And there was one photo of her on the Chicago Herald with a bunch of people with the photo with the inscription beneath, missing. And so she was found later. I mean, my grandmother identified her body, but there were a ton of people. Entire families were killed. And it was just, one of my relatives said that there was no family who was unaffected by it because at the time, the people who worked for Western Electric encompassed Cicero, I think most of Cicero, which is kind of a suburb of Chicago. And this was like a city within the city. So it was just huge amounts of people that were working there. They had their own post office. It was a self-contained unit, much like, actually, I worked for Ford many years later, and Ford was very much like that as well. So you didn't have to go anyplace. You could just, live there basically and, go home. So companies, quote unquote, took care of their employees, and there was always a price when that takes place. But that's what the thing was. So Chicago went into this massive state of heartbreak, but I thought, they talk about the St. Valentine's Day massacre. They talk about the fire. They talk about the Iroquois theater fire. Why would Chicago forget its own Titanic?
Yes.
And I still don't have an answer for that. I would say the default that I always resort to is the fact that these people were not, quote unquote, important. They were working class. We are. I'm only like a second generation immigrant. My family's basically from countries that don't exist, but all in Eastern Europe. And many did end up in Ukraine. But
right.
That part of the family was originally in what is now Kaliningrad, but they basically kind of migrated a bit westward, ended up in Poland. But they were also mixed. I mean, mixed Polish, mixed ethnic Germans in this area. So all my family has very complex identities. I've got Romani, which is sometimes called Gypsy, Ashkenazi Jewish, Carpatho-Rusins, the Polish, the Germans, and Slovak. So it's the whole, as we call it, a mishigas. It's a mess. So it's like, so those complex identities come with their complex voices, and they set off little, those little balls behind you. I'm sure that's part of what's going on there. But there's a lot of. Go ahead.
You quieted it down once you started to tell your story.
Oh yeah, so they're calm now. But so that's what happened, and then this began as a research project for me. I wanted to let you know that even though I grew up with my father's side of the family, the very spooky, witchy, paranormal focused group of people, I decided that as I grew up, I wanted to become very sophisticated and distance myself from some of the shenanigans that I saw growing up. They were living in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. They had their ways, folk magic, spells and hexes, talking to the dead, things flying all over the place. And I thought, oh my God, I wanted something normal like Leave It to Beaver. And I had the Addams Family. And I just was one of those kind of things where kids rebel, right? And I did. And so I thought this kooky bunch, they were very much, and it's funny, I'm going off, I do go off on tangents, so pull me back, but as I've gotten older, I've talked with the other cousins who spent time with my dad's family, and we would talk with each other, and we would hesitantly say, do you remember when stuff started flying off the walls when they were communicating with some dead people? Yeah, I thought I made that up, and I thought, wow. So part of returning to this part of the family history and creating this book, I had to revisit stuff that I talked myself out of years ago. And that was very difficult to uncover it. I will always have an uneasy relationship with this stuff primarily because I want to be respectful of it. And I would never trivialize my family or any of that. And I know I know why they were very cautious and didn't talk about it with good reason. Because we did lose somebody during the Inquisition back in my ancestry because she was considered a witch.
Wow.
Yeah, so so there's a lot of gravitas that I feel toward the whole subject. So it's not fun. It's part of who we are. And so I think when I approached this topic of the Eastland and my great Aunt Martha's death, I was approaching it as an author, as a journalist. And I wanted to find out about it. I wanted to write about it for our local newspaper and then be done with it. And then as I was putting this article together, things started happening. And the old things of my childhood with, unseen presence where I could feel, at that point I was single, living alone in a nice little apartment in St. Paul. It was like somebody was in there with me. And I thought, oh, what fresh hell is this? I thought, oh, no. And it was familiar to me, but I thought, oh, no, this is not happening. And so it was multi-layered insofar as I'm doing the research for the article, trying to find out things. Somebody created a website finally for the good old Eastland Disaster. And yet there was also this other thing about, okay, I'm connecting to this woman. And I thought, what do you want? What do you want from me? And I thought, my mind went to all sorts of things. I thought, can I go back to write this thing? How do I write it? Write the ship? You write it by writing it. I mean, RIGHT by WRITE. I thought, just write it. And so the deeper and here's the other funny story about this. Remember, I moved up here to get away from my family. So as I was researching my great aunt who was killed, I thought there's got to be other relatives who might have known of her on my mother's side. When I began researching my great-great-grandmother and her children, I noticed that they immigrated to western Wisconsin, which is about an hour away from where I moved. And then I started seeing names of people in Minnesota near where I was living who had passed away. And I realized I'd moved to the mothership somehow. And I moved here to the Twin Cities because it felt familiar, even though I didn't know anyone and was related to no one as far as I knew. So that, in an odd way, is even more powerful than any of the supernatural events I've ever had. Because some stuff you can't explain. You can't explain away. You can dismiss a person, but I can't dismiss that move because I moved here. And so then I began researching that bunch, and it was just like, holy moly, what did I do? And it turned, I think you get to a certain age in life and you think you know all about your family and you have a very fixed sense of who you are. And I thought, who the hell am I? So that's how life began to spiral out of control. And it had to spiral out of control in order to reintegrate.
It's interesting. Totally fascinating.
Yeah.
I'd like to take a quick moment too to just present some of the comments and say hi to our audience out there, because I don't know if a lot of you guys out there saying hello to you and enjoying this. Hello, Greg Koss. And I know you have a really good comment.
Yes.
That I want to bring up in a moment. Liz Milne, Anne-Marie Young. Hey, Mike Quincy from Dark Hour Paranormal. Thank you. Good to see you.
Jealousy.
Mia Egg. And I want to wish happy birthday to Del Lessie of the Delicious Recipe. He says he's still in birthday mode. So that's a friend of ours, and he has a show called The Delicious Recipe. We're on it recently.
Yes.
Ourselves. And great show. Thank you. Hello to Ken from the Wizard's Table out there. We are looking forward to seeing you soon.
Yes, please.
And everybody else that's made a comment. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Greg brought up a good point just about the boat itself and why it might have capsized. He had heard from his wife's grandpa, who was there, that all the people that went to one side of the boat for the picture that the cameraman was taking from the other side of the river. So as you had mentioned, it was like an event day, and there were photographers there, and apparently maybe this played into it. People went to one side of the boat. It was uneven with those concrete fillings, and that was enough to turn it over. Does that sound
I don't know that that's correct. I've heard that point debated, but I have heard that point. And it's like who to say. I mean, it could very well have contributed to the mess, but that thing was already a powder keg. I mean, that's the interesting thing, because I've seen actually, before I realized that, the Eastland story, I went on one of those boats across Lake Michigan before I knew about this. I would never do that, knowing about that. I thought with our family's luck, no way. But we did the same thing because we wanted to see, and I'm sure people go on cruises and do the same thing, but this thing, I think it was the way it was built and the laws of physics were against it. So, but I'm sure people running to the side to get photos and everything else taken didn't help. And there was also a filmmaker there, and they found the film a few years ago. It was over 100 years old. They were able to restore, a few seconds of it, but it was in some vault in Amsterdam. How it got there, no one knows. It's just one of those things, and it is available now. So there's just all this. So there's so many things about this that at once will be known and other ways will never be known. There's always this continual mystery that pulls you into this thing, and it's like, oh golly. And I'm sure as time goes by, we'll learn even more about what really happened.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Most definitely.
Sure.
I'm just glad you brought this up and out so everybody, could know about it.
Yeah, I was completely unaware of this.
Glad somebody knows about it too. So cool on you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Worthy of knowing about. Yeah. Huge.
Absolutely.
Huge.
So I'm so sorry. My pages aren't coming up. So
as you were saying, Natalie, I'm sorry, where did we leave that off?
I don't know where we left it off. I have kind of, let me look at my notes here.
I apologize. You came out to Chicago, you
synchronicity.
transplanted. There was some synchronicity going on.
Exactly.
You felt familiar in this place, and you had other people in your family living there already.
I did, and the other aspect that I cover in the book is that the first time I went to Chicago, I had never been to Chicago before. And again, the same thing happened where it felt familiar, and it would be a number of years before I would find out about this. But one thing to just stop and pause and say is that I think if we feel these things, sometimes we put them to one side, or at least I dismiss those. And I pray to God that's like, oh, I don't want to be like the Addams family here, but I did remember it. And there was another thing that happened too, along the lines of synchronicity, but also facts. When I was at Luther Seminary as a student, I had a job at one of the adoption agencies. Because I was a published writer, I would get these weird writing jobs. And people wanted me to write stories for people who were either birth parents or birth children. And they wanted to get non-identifying information, but I had to come up with stories about their lives to make them interesting. And so people could have a sense of who they were, who they came from, well before the DNA tests and things like this. Mm-hmm. And every case I worked on, whether it was birth child separated from birth parent, almost all the time, the child would follow the path of one or both of the parents without ever having met them. And it was one of those things, again, that happened years before this discovery, but it was one of those things where myself said to myself, file this away. It's going to come in handy someday. So these types of things, and I hope that those who listen to this, it's like, yeah, it'd be nice if you got my book because I owe people money. But by the same token, what I really hope is that you start to explore yourself and start to look at what's inside that blood, because there are some fascinating things that I think we all find out, and they can enrich and horrify us, and they can embarrass us and all these things, but they all make up who we are. So I just hope people feel like, yeah, I can do that. If she did that, I can do that too. So it is doable. Pain in the neck, but it's doable.
Absolutely. And I think that's such an interesting concept, even just looking into family history on that kind of level. Where does one begin? If you're interested
at the beginning, no. To quote Linda, I don't know. I think that in my case, it was accidental. It was because my mom's sister was, older, and she gave me this document. Otherwise, I honestly didn't care. I didn't. The family that I did know of my mother's, that was her father's side, I didn't care for them. I loved my father's side. They were much more interesting. The spooky ones, I just loved them, and I felt more of identity with them. And my mother's side, I just wanted nothing to do with, because they did have some characters that I would not want to meet in a dark alley. And I thought, oh, so what I did, unfortunately, is I dismissed the whole of my mother's family. And because her mother died when she was 3 and she was in Pennsylvania, my mother knew nothing about her mother. And the other gift of doing family history was right before my mother died this January, I was able to get that book to her in time. And she knew what I was doing. And she said, I mean, to the end, she had that gallows sense of humor. And she said, "Are you going to finally publish that damn thing?" And I said, "Yeah." And I kind of rushed it. I had a second set of edits that I needed to do, but one of my mentors said, "Just get it." She said, "Get it to her in time." She said, "You can always fix whatever," because I did, the independent publishing. She said, "Independent publishers are always fixing stuff, as are genealogists, because there's always new information coming forth." She said, "Get it to her." And she said, "Well, I hope I don't croak before I get the book." And she got it before she croaked, indeed. And she was just until the end, but she held it. And my sister said that she held it and went to sleep. And then she died maybe about a week or so after she got it. But she knew it was a promise fulfilled. And it was her history that was lost. And both of my parents, both my mom and dad, had tremendous loss on both sides. And it was a way for me, the black sheep of the family who left, to come back and say, "Here, this is for you. This fills in the missing pieces." And she had the information well before she had the book, but she had to have that book to hold on to.
I think that's wonderful.
That's awesome.
I'm sorry for your loss in January.
Thank you. Thank you. It's still not real, but she's like everybody else in that family. They tend to hang around. So she's still here, hanging out, lighting balls, whatever.
She might be. She may well be.
She might be doing stuff because, she kind of like that sort of thing. So, so that's all the gifts. I think if you're listening to this, there's so many gifts. And until you start exploring, you really don't know. I really didn't know. And so basically my aunt and that story of the Eastland was only the beginning. And it was exciting, and it is exciting, and it's wonderful having the book out. But it's just, in a sense, touched the tip of the iceberg, not to use that Titanic reference. But you know what I mean. There was so many more things that I was led to discover, including the fact that I'm related to most of Western Wisconsin, when I realized how many people that I had in that family.
Wow.
And I know. And it's just like, whoa. And we all have an image of who we are and who our families are. And again, I always thought of myself as, if not sophisticated, I mean, Cleveland, come on. But I was from cities, and to see folks who live in these towns of 1,000 people, which is where my great-great-grandmother and her children lived, that was a whole different trip to go there. And I thought, my God, it's only 1 block long. And to see a different side of myself and to say, no, these are blood, these are these people. And it's like, what do you have to teach me? And what do I have to teach you? But at the same token, as I entered their lives and they entered mine, we disrupted each other's lives. So there is, I call it the unintended consequences of family history. Once you start meeting people, not everybody is going to welcome you. Some people will welcome you, which mostly I've had, but it can be disarming for them as well as they meet you and just thought, who are you? Oh, my Lord, And but they all bought my book. So it's wonderful. They're sitting there reading that book in those little small towns in their cabins. And it's like, wow. They've been wonderful. So as I've had loss, I've had gains.
That is so great. And I just a couple more hellos and comments out there. Robert Honings, hello, buddy. I think I forgot you on the first pass. Liz Milne, if I didn't mention you, from Scotland. There's lots of comments out there and saying hello and chatting up our audience. Laurie Ann Sweet, hello again. And Wizard Stable is. Ken Allen asks, what sources did you use to do your genealogy?
Oh, what the question is, what source didn't I use? I use, well, if we're just talking about records, I used the library at the time. I used every newspaper that was ever on microfilm, and records. I mean, now that if you guys belong, it sounds like Ancestry DNA, Ancestry.com and those types of things. They have so many records. So census records are actually really helpful. And again, I can't stress the importance of newspapers. Especially like in small towns like the one that my great-great-grandmother was living in. They have these teeny tiny little newspapers that have all this gossip and information about who's killing who and who ends up in jail for being drunk. It's good stuff. I mean, so it's just, so they don't put that in the big paper. The Chicago Tribune, of course, the Chicago Herald. So yes, all of those records. In terms of DNA, I do genetic genealogy quasi-professionally. It just takes up too much time. But I've been able to locate birth parents for my immediate, not close family, but for my cousins and people like this. We had one 80-year-old mystery where my cousin didn't know his birth father. And between myself and his wife, we were able to tag team and figure it out. So it was, again, for him, closure. So that was a wonderful thing. And fortunately, the family that is still living welcomed him. And he was an only child, but not anymore. So there are all these people.
So wonderful.
So I think it's just using, to answer the question, anything I can get my hands on. Old books. For the Eastland, there were Red Cross records that were being thrown out from the time. Somebody found them in a garbage, scanned them, and put them online. Those kinds of things. So it's one of those things. And I can also say familysearch.org. That's operated by the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. They have so many things. So if you go on there, they'll teach you how to do things. They have wikis. And it's incredible. And for me, being from Eastern Europe and Russia and those countries that they're so fluid, I'm fluent in terms of reading several languages, including anything in the Cyrillic alphabet, because I have to be. So part of learning genealogy and records is learning the different languages your folks came from, whether it's any language that's not English. And I'm always relieved when I get a record in English, but I'm not used to that. So it's just like it's a privilege. But so I would just say, just keep availing oneself of all the things that are out there. There's so many commercial sites, so many things. And again, be prepared for unexpected, crazy things to happen. But that's part of the fun of it once you get past the trauma. But, what can I say?
Sure.
It's like,
Sure.
I'm related to that person. Oh, my God.
That's
so, yeah.
a seemingly obscure resource, but a very good one.
Mm-hmm.
You would think that would be the first place to go.
Did you have to go through microfiche and all that great stuff?
Early on, I did, because that was the only thing that was available. And in fact, the other thing I can say to people is, I know the pandemic has kept a lot of us contained, but there's nothing like being able to go to a city or a town or a village, like the case of this little Wisconsin village that my ancestors lived in. I found a book that somebody had written there. It wasn't for sale. You couldn't get it online because, online, they didn't do that sort of thing. I was able to get a hold of it. It was the entire history of this little teeny tiny village. Almost everybody in the photos I'm related to. So I would say, I know, it's just so weird. Go to the places where your people are from. And you can find a genealogical, historical society. And there's always a geeky person like me who will talk your ear off about this stuff, because we want somebody to listen to us besides the walls. And so, so there's so many wonderful resources. So once things really lighten up again, and there's no weird other diseases coming our way, I would just say go to where your people are. And I haven't spent. Actually, you had somebody from Scotland. I actually lived in Scotland on Cumbrae Island, near Largs, near Glasgow. So I don't know where this person's from, but I love Scotland. Oh my gosh, I wish I had any Scottish ancestry, but I have a love for Scotland. But so I would just say, look in unexpected places and start interviewing the oldest people that that you're related to, because as what happened with all of mine, none of them are alive anymore. The ones that I was in contact with early on, I taped them, I interviewed them. And even with my mother, she was a talker, she was a historian, but there's so many things now. I wish I could call her up and say, hey, can you tell me, where were you in the 1950 census now that that's released? I can't find her. She was someplace, but who knows? So stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That's a long-winded answer. I'll stop talking. Yes. Anything else?
That's awesome, and it gives people an idea. I do think what you mentioned about the local relatives and maybe like the local library resources will give you something that you will not find on the internet. Not everything is on Google.
Correct.
We've noticed in our own research, sometimes being in the town that you're looking into, or maybe a haunted location or people you're looking for, they'll have some kind of information that you just can't find anywhere else. It might be in the form of a very old book that you can't even take from the library. You need to do the research there and that sort of thing. Totally recommend that people do that. At what point in your research did you start to see things that might be termed supernatural?
Almost from the get-go. And there was one particular event that really kind of turned me on its head. I was already feeling when I was doing the research for this article, and again, this was for one of the small newspapers in St. Paul that I was a freelancer for. So I had a guaranteed spot for this article about my Aunt Martha in the Eastland research project. And I thought, oh, this will be fun. And I was working with another woman on this, and she said, oh, that article, she said, you know what? She said, it's so clinical. She said, why don't you go down to Chicago, find the grave, and then write about it? You have to see the grave. I said, oh, I don't know where that is. And I was able to locate the cemetery. And again, this is before GPS was kind of the thing it is now. Mm-hmm. And like my mother and father, I have no sense of direction. So I thought, oh my God, I could be in Chicago for years before I find my way back. So I had a map, and I was planning to go down there. And it's about an 8-hour drive from St. Paul. So I decided to break up the trip, and I stayed in a hotel in Wisconsin. That night in the hotel, things started happening. There were these really strange noises. And I, again, felt like I was not alone. I thought, well, what's going on here? And there was a sound. If you remember the old shortwave radios, was this crackling and noise and that type of thing. That's what it sounded like. But there was no source for this. And I thought, what is going on here? And as the night progressed and I couldn't sleep, I kept seeing outlines in the room, and I wasn't so terrified that I felt like I needed to switch the light on like I did early on. But I thought, just relax with it. You know this. You've seen this when you were a kid. Just go with it. And when I would try to focus in on the shapes, they would disappear. You know how you look at something directly in the dark and it goes away? Mm-hmm. And I thought, there's people in here with me. Damn it. Who are they? And I thought, whoa. And then when I woke up, it was like coming out of a haze. And I thought, did that happen? But I had to hit the cemetery because it was Labor Day weekend. I had the article due in a few days. So I hit the road, drove down to Chicago, and finally found the cemetery, which I realized it might not have even been open. And once I got there, it was a sea of graves. And I thought, oh, my God, the office wasn't open. I thought, how am I going to find my aunt and anybody else that's in there that I know? I didn't know. And so I parked the car, and I kept running up and down the graves. And I was like a crazy person. I was just like a crop duster. And I asked some guy who was there. I was just insane by that point because I hadn't slept, and I was seeing images. And I thought, I thought, let me find this thing. And I couldn't find it. And I was so upset. I was crying. And then as I was walking back, thinking, I'm just going to go back and, feel sorry for myself, I tripped. And I didn't fall down. But the trip kind of threw me in a direction toward where I parked the car. For whatever reason, I didn't see that I had parked right in front of my family's headstone when I drove there, but I didn't see it at first.
Another synchronicity.
Yeah, I just didn't see it. And I was staring. I thought, oh, my God, that's it. And it's a massive headstone because on one side of the headstone are my great-grandparents. And on the other side is my great-aunt who was killed in the Eastland. And above her grave, above her headstone, it says, Auf die Eastland. In German, that means on the Eastland. Ruhet in Frieden, German, massacring it. Rest in peace. And so it told how she died. And someone thought it was important that we know that someone in the future knows how she died, because that cemetery, which was Bethania Cemetery, a Protestant cemetery, did not have, I think she might be the only Eastland victim there, because that particular family, my mother's family, was Lutheran. And the Bohemian National Cemetery, also in Chicago, I think has the most victims, and those were mostly Czech folks, maybe some Slovak, but they have some beautiful statuary. But Bethania was also a quite healthy-sized cemetery. So when I fell in front of the grave and then I just kind of collapsed in front of it, I thought, oh my God, here you are. And it made it real. And so after I got through my mini breakdown, and I thought, how did I get here? How did I find you? How did you find me? I mean, I thought it was near miraculous until years later, I read a couple books about psychic genealogy written by Hank Z. Jones. And he said, oh, it's really common for people to find graves. It's like nothing. And I thought, well, it didn't feel like that, Hank. So I was just, at the time, as I was pretty isolated, again, there was only one friend I talked about with this stuff because I was so self-conscious about the supernatural stuff was one of the things that kept me from really discussing it openly.
Right. You had rebelled against this in your youth, and even though you might have come to terms with it as an adult, I'm sure it still felt a little awkward.
Felt very awkward. And again, since my dad had died, and my dad, his last few years were very dreadful in terms of his breakdowns. He had a lot of, my dad had a lot of early trauma, and it finally visited him as he got older. And I thought, oh my God, I was really worried. I thought, am I turning into my dad now? Oh my Lord. I mean, there were just so many things going on in my head at that point because I felt completely unanchored, completely unmoored. Everything I thought I knew about myself and my family was not true. There was more to be found. And I had to basically decide to let go of the steering wheel, let them lead me. I thought, whatever this is, let's pretend you're real and you're leading this. I pretended she was real and leading me. And as I pretended, she seemed to come forth. And so it became, as I stopped fighting her, my aunt who was killed, the synchronicities abounded, and I did not dismiss them. I didn't talk about them, but they just escalated. So when I got back to St. Paul to write my little article, and it was a good article by that point because I'd seen the grave, I had photos and everything. I had a small apartment, and I was in my little office in my bedroom, and stuff started flying off my refrigerator. And St. Paul, Minneapolis, St. Paul is not on an earthquake fault line, okay? And I thought, now what? And when you live in a small place, you just shove crap on top of the refrigerator. That's what I did. So I took the crap, paper towels, Kleenexes, shoved the crap further back. I thought, okay, I don't know what this is. Went back to the room as I was typing my, wonderful conclusion to the article. It happened again. And I went out there and put things back. And I thought, what's going on? What's going on? And then the third time it happened, I went out there and I said, don't you dare. If you want something, talk to me directly, but don't be doing this stuff. I'm already freaked out. And so I was like, I thought we were going to have a relationship here. You're not going to be doing these tricks. What do you want? Tell me. I'm trying to listen here, but no need for carnival stuff. Okay. Grew up with that stuff. Don't need that. So if things settled down, but I was so freaked out, I called Mommy. My mother was still alive. And my mother was very much of the skeptic side of things, which I have quite a bit of that as well inside me. I have kind of the both and type of conflict. It's like, oh, I don't know what to look at. But I called her and I said, Mom, I think I bought something back from Chicago I didn't intend, besides, the stone from the grave and photos. She said, what's that? I said, I think I brought back Aunt Martha. She said, what? I said, yeah. And she listened to me talk, and I was ready to be dismissed by her. And she said, look at it this way. If you did, she's not going to hurt you. I said, okay. She said, well, just ask her what she wants. And then she hung up on me. And I thought, okay. And then later on, she told me when my dad died, kind of the same things were happening, which is why she wasn't surprised, but she didn't want to talk about it. So we all both didn't want to talk about these things. And then my sister, who was married and living in a different home, she said, yeah, I had things like that happening too. So we all had things happening, but none of us wanted to really talk about it. So then my great aunt Martha kind of brought us all into a level of honesty that we were kind of embarrassed by. So it escalated after that. And again, the nice thing or the horrifying thing about it is, who am I going to call? Ghostbusters? I mean, there was nobody to talk to. I thought, I have to learn to live with this stuff. And in a sense, even though this took a few years, I thought I have to claim this other side of my family, the legacy that I've inherited from my father's people, with their long, long line of communing with the dead. And it's very natural. As my dad's sister used to say, she was very dramatic. She said, we are of the Carpathian mountain people, and we hear the dead and the living just the same. We are part, Romany. And it makes no difference, darling. Everything was over the top with her. But I thought, you know what? She was right. She was right. A little kooky, but she was right. So I began to piece my life back together. And when you're fragmented, as most of us are, and that's why I always encourage people to look, because you never know. You might find a friend in that background who's just like you. And you can find some resonance and some strength and some courage from that person. And I think that's the biggest gift of that sort of thing. And then where I am in life, it's like, now I've got all these younger relatives who are interested in this stuff, and it's wonderful to tell them the stories. And they're so captivated by it. And with the DNA test, this is off topic, with the DNA test, you know how they'll say, you're related to a famous person. And through my mother's line, I'm also related to unlucky Nicholas II, Tsar of Russia. So,
Come on.
yeah. It's, believe me, you don't make up stuff like that. So, not a direct descendant, thank God. But yes, we have the
a
same.
lot in common because I am too Romani from the Carpathian Mountains.
There you go.
I'm not kidding you. Persian,
I believe it.
Bulgarian.
Okay.
We're Prussian, and believe it or not,
It's even a little more in common there too with the refrigerator.
That's why I was giggling with the refrigerator.
The little balls. Don't forget the little balls. I should have had those when I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
The Tsar of Prussia is who we are related to. Maximum. So yeah. So
you must be on my DNA list then, Kirstin.
Yeah,
I mean, you must be on there.
Yeah, we're gonna have to look now.
Anyway, here we go.
Anything you don't know about from the DNA company.
Yeah.
I know I get those all the time. You're related to so and so.
Yeah, it's
sure. The phenomenon of things flying off your fridge
That's
as
why
well.
I giggled when you said that.
I've
it's actually a family thing. I don't know. Yeah.
So that Carpathian Mountains. I don't know. I think y'all are haunted.
Well, we all are haunted. We just carry it with us. So that's that. I suppose a few years ago, Kirstin, this would have surprised me. Now it doesn't. I mean, sometimes I'm sorry that I've lost some of that amazement, but it's like, well, of course you are. Why wouldn't you be? And
right? Like a lot of times you hear these stories, and I know we tell these stories about stuff that's happened to us, and I'm sure most of the people that hear it go, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Right.
But once you have that experience, or something similar, but you just cannot explain it rationally, then you go, yeah, maybe there's something to that, right? It's one thing to go stories, but it's another thing to be part of one.
Yeah, very well said.
It is. And I was thinking when, Chris, when you were saying that, I thought somebody, I don't know, I'd like to always give attribution to the right source, but somebody said, you're just one experience from becoming a believer. And I prefer to think of myself as a experiencer, not a believer, because really, despite the theology degree, I'm not really a believer. I mean, I studied the stuff so I could basically take it apart, but the experience is what sent me back into the realm of, the Eastern European Russian mysticism that is also in our blood. We know that. And I did a lot of reading of Russian literature when I was in my undergrad years, and it very much about the mystical, about the otherworldly stuff. It's very natural for those of us who kind of straddle both worlds. And I think having that front and center, whoever's listening to this, whoever your people, your multi-people are, having it front and center, as opposed to having it blindside you, like, why am I doing this weird crap? It's like, it's much more powerful. It's more fun too.
It is. Now, when you said earlier that you wanted your aunt to speak to you and you asked her to, how did you go about that? Did you get it psychically inclined? Did you use a spirit box, a shortwave radio to get any kind of like an EVP?
Well, I had a bunch of Ouija boards at one point, because that's the other thing we grew up with, but they were long gone. But I guess it was just getting quiet. I mean, getting quiet wasn't just not yakking, but it was me silencing my mind. And I don't really follow any type of meditation practice, but I thought, inside me, I thought, how to do this. And I had seen growing up, my dad's family, the practitioners of all the dark arts, they didn't sit down and teach anybody, but it wasn't what was taught, it was caught. I watched how they behaved in their relationship with the supernatural or their relationship with communicating. And it was very much listening to that still, small voice. Then this acknowledgement, it starts to feel right. It's kind of like when I was writing the article and it clicked. It was like, that's it. And so it would be, what do you want from me? And it was not a directional, you don't want to hear the command voices, because if you tell a therapist that, off you go. Yeah. But it was more like, do this, look at this, look at, or check out this thing. And it was like nothing dramatic. I would say nothing dramatic, but after the 500 coincidence, it was like they were all starting to line up. And I suppose it's like the yellow Jeep phenomenon. Once you get one, you see them everywhere. But once I had the awareness, it was just like, don't dismiss it, Natalie. Listen to it. And as you practice a skill or practice an innate ability that you have, it does get stronger. And I became less apologetic about it. And I thought, there's in my daily life, there's always the screwy stuff that you do. But in terms of that stuff, it was like I was dead right. And I was always, even though I distanced myself from my past in some ways, I was always able to intuit somebody. I mean, I could get with somebody within a few seconds and think, "Uh-oh, stay away from that one," or this is somebody you want to spend time with, or this is somebody who's neutral, and neither here nor there. So much so as when I had a small training company, the HR director, we had like 10 employees. She said, "Would you walk through the lobby and give me a read on the person who's sitting out there?" And I said, "Sure." And I would go back and say, "Well, if you hire them, you're going to have this, that, and the other to deal with." And she would, because she would defy me. And then she said, "How did you know that?" I said, "I don't know how I know that." But so I was activating my intuition all along because I think it kept me safe too. There were dangers that I ran into by some of my adventures and some of the fairly dangerous places that I ended up in. Had I not listened, I think I would have ended up like one of my friends, murdered. So there were things that I definitely feel like, well, am I special? No, I just bothered to listen. So the skill was there, but it was kind of like learning to tune your channel. Maybe that's a good analogy or metaphor for it, and not discount it. And then be willing to make mistakes, because a lot of times I was bringing my bias into it. I was bringing my fear into it, and learning how to course correct, just as you do with genealogy, just as you do with a book, course correct. It's like new information. We need to fix this. New information, turn this way. Always, always, always course correction. Nothing is ever settled.
That's right. That's right.
Very true.
That information comes in ways and excuse me, the mind will try to change it, filter it, and that kind of stuff. And it's easy to get deterred off your course.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But you were having those communications, and do you feel like they were responding to your communications back?
Yes, they were, and for whatever reason, a lot of the what I would call spooky stuff, not so much because there was no more of the refrigerator action, because I just said no, but there was always this feeling of somebody touching the back of my hands. I don't know if you've had that, Kirstin, but somebody touching your hands, somebody like the room. I don't know why they want to always make the room temperature go down, but there was that business too, and it's like, oh, I'm always cold anyway. I thought, I'll stop that, but there was a sense of that going on. And again, the sense of when I would be writing about this, or when I would be meeting other people to whom I was related, that it would be kind of a pull from the heart. It was just this little small village that I was talking about. I went to the library to get some more information about my family. And I met the librarian, who of course turned out to be a relative, because in that village. But she said to me, she was really kind of hostile toward me at first, but then she realized who I was. And she said, "I understand that you exist. I know about your great-grandmother, and I know about what happened to your aunt." She said, "But why did you come back here? City folks aren't usually interested in us." And I said, I don't know. I said, I just felt compelled. So there's also the willingness to go kind of blindfolded, or kind of, in a sense, on the stream of air that's leading you, not knowing where you're going to end up, because you might end up in a very uncomfortable place too. And uncomfortable meaning, I wasn't expecting this. Now what do I do? And realizing within yourself that you have the guidance and the confidence to handle whatever comes your way. And I think if you don't step out in faith, and I don't mean religious faith, guys, because, but I mean just in faith that you have people who love you. You have some who don't, so I stay away from them. That's the other thing with these ancestors. It's like they're not all that great, some of these people. So it's like, I just want to hang with the ones that have my best interest at heart, not the other characters.
Most definitely.
And I got plenty of those. Yeah, I got plenty of those. And so, I do. It's just like, some of them are unbelievable as well. But it's also no more than I would want to hang out in present tense with a living person that did not have my best interest at heart. It's like, nah, life's too short, folks.
It's very true.
Yes, setting boundaries with them.
What told you that certain relatives didn't like you? Like, how do you just get that impression? Or
I think, the vibe. And also to some of them I could tell, because I was a little bit out there for them. I mean, I've always been kind of, like I said, more my dad's family, and my dad was an entertainer, and a lot of us end up being actors and kind of wackadoo theater people. We're a little bit kind of to the left of center, to the left of that left center. And some of these relatives that I met were very much small town, and total respect for them too, by the way. I'm not making fun of anybody from a small town or from the country, but very much they're around people who are of the same religion, same ethnicities, and their world is big, but it's also contained, right? And so they see something like me coming into town, with the hair all over the place and everything and talking the way I talk, And so it's just like, oh, what's this? But once, for the most part, I would have to say for every person I met, once they got past me, scaring them, you're not so bad after all. You're kind of fun. You're kind of like one of us. You're related anyway. So, you just come on in and have a seat. We'll have you over for supper. So that kind of thing happened. And so, they're wondering, I can do it. I'm the Meryl Streep of this, anyways, but, the accents, how that is when you grow up with these people that speak differently. But I think just learning respect for them too, and learning that, even though there's so many divisions, there's also this connection from the heart. Speaking of today, all the things that can bring us together. That's one of those things, no matter how far our paths were, we came back. We met each other and we provided, connection, but also missing pieces. Like that one, I always said that 1/4 piece of pie, the genetic pie that was missing, was very significant. And once I found that, it was like, it's not like I've had an easy life. I haven't, but things started coming together. And there wasn't this searching for whatever the thing was that I was looking for. It was like the thing is inside me. I just didn't know it.
It's kind of like what people say about spirit guides, right? Like, you just need to open your ears and listen. Like they're trying to tell you the whole time, but it's so easy to turn your head and not hear the message.
Discount them. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So I would just say for anybody, it's just like, have a wonderful, if you do this sort of thing, I think it's, boy, I've been yakking for a while, haven't I? I normally don't talk. I'm an introvert, by the way. I normally don't talk at all, but
totally.
This has been fun. I just talk.
It's just so weird, but yep, totally.
It's just, but the other thing too, when I, have done different discussions with people, the other thing is, remember, we are all future dead people. And it's not to be depressing, it's to be real. And considering, what do I want to leave behind? My aunt who was killed, she left some photos and then she didn't leave that much behind. And I had to construct a story, going through a lot to get that story. And I thought, I don't want to, though it was a character building experience for me, I don't want to do that to somebody in the future, because there's going to be some kooky person 100 years from now who's just like me, who's wondering, am I like anybody else in this normal family of mine? Is there not another eccentric, crazy person that I can relate to? Yes, me. I'll leave you something. Okay, I'll leave you a map. I'll leave you all the stories. Here you go. No need to feel like you're the odd one out, because you're not. So I think of those kinds of things too. What can we leave behind? And it's easier now with all the access to media. We can leave. I have thousands of cat videos. I have 4 cats, so we do have a lot of that. But I don't. Yeah, that's the other thing too. It must be a Carpathian thing. But it's like, what do I want to curate? What message do I want to give to my future people who I don't even know? They're not even born yet, and that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay.
You're kind of commenting on Memento Mori.
Yes, Memento Mori. Yes.
Number you will die, and I love that, because I love it. It was a big thing in the spiritualist movement.
Yes.
Early 1900s, when that phrase became more like a common language, and people kept things. In their introduction video, you see a clock there with a skeleton clicking it.
I saw that. Yeah.
That is like an example of Memento Mori. Like they had stuff like that.
I love that.
Pocket watches, things that would say Memento Mori on them, and coffins and certain little things, trinkets, because life is short, right? You need to enjoy it. Remember that it won't be there forever. Enjoy this time. We believe firmly that consciousness persists beyond bodily death.
Oh yeah.
I think we should enjoy our time in this 3-dimensional world we call reality.
Exactly. And we can take some of it with us. And I was just thinking, as you were talking, Chris, about the movie Coco, about the Mexican Day of the Dead, and how wonderful that was. I mean, did you just cry? I mean, it was just like,
Yeah, I love
the ofrenda.
With the Day of the Dead, that they have a holiday to remember it. Like we have Memorial Day.
Yes.
Almost exclusive or something, but I don't know. I like that, the general, remember where you came from.
Absolutely. Sugar skulls. Love them,
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, right?
Watch The Book of Life by Guillermo del Toro. his name is. That
No,
one's
I will. Is it good? Okay, good. Thank you.
it's
Thank you.
a little like Coco, but a little better. I love it's the entire story of how the Day of the Dead and
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
the Forgotten, and it's
Love
really
it. Love
Yeah.
it. Love it.
we love all this stuff too.
I can tell at once that I can tell by your backdrop what you love. So
I
it's
feel like
it's awesome to
we
see
have a
that.
lot in common. I really do.
Yes, we do in more ways than well. Again, it's. I love that this happened, but it doesn't surprise me.
Actually, not us anymore either. We
Exactly.
meet the best people, honest to God,
do.
and end up becoming our friends.
Well, you
Oh,
are
yeah.
wonderful. That's why. I mean, I think good people. It's just the amazing people that I've been able to, like meeting you all and the invisible people that are here now. It's like this book has also opened the door for me to have additional connections like you. And it's like, wow, I wouldn't have had that had I not jumped out and just thought, let's just do it, see what happens, fix the typos later, whatever,
Exactly. And some of those connections have turned out to be great friends.
Yes,
And it's a wonderful thing. We feel privileged,
very, very
I do
great.
as well.
So
I do as
yeah,
well.
thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
This is wonderful. We've gotten to learn a lot of, just about the Eastman incident itself was something I just wasn't on my radar at all.
And where can people find you and your book?
Well, I think you have it right below there. So at www.flowerandtheriver.com. I didn't know that was just going to be such a long thing, but my website's probably the easiest place. And the book is available at all the shopping. I published wide. I did an independent publishing. So I published through Amazon, but also Barnes & Noble, also through any foreign, publishing exchange aggregator that I could use. And right now, why my voice is so harsh and low, I've been doing the audio for the book. So using my acting chops and creating all these characters. Oh my gosh, talk about re-experiencing the whole crazy thing again. But I'm working on the audio. Hope to have it done by the end of the summer. So yeah, I love audiobook.
Oh, that's awesome.
And thank you to Linda Judd for putting in the link to Natalie's.
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah.
Link to the book and the ebook.
She did.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Linda.
Appreciate it. And again, thank you, Greg, for your comments. And
Greg.
Shadow Hunters Paranormal. Check them out.
Yes, please.
And our audience is wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Yes,
and
thank you
thank
very
you so much, Natalie. This has been a lot of fun. I'm glad we actually spelled out some of the websites, because some people will hear this as a podcast next week, and I'll let you know when that comes out. And,
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve Claire.
And Marie Young. Thank you, guys. We're off this Saturday. We'll be back next week. I saw some murmur in the chat that we were off the month of June. That's not true. We're just taking some select nights off. So stay tuned wherever you are checking out our show. Yeah, exactly. We're not taking that much time off. So we'll be back. Thank you again, Natalie. We appreciate it.
Thank you both.
And enjoy.
Take care.
Happy Memorial Day. Enjoy your weekend.
Happy Memorial Day. Remember us all. Thank you so much again. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.